Hey, welcome to Beat Everyone. I'm Ben Flanagan with AL.com, and after a monster win in Athens over Kirby Smart and the always outstanding Georgia Bulldogs, the stakes only get bigger. Now, you go from one of the best SEC programs in this league to the next on deck for Alabama, a revenge game of the highest order as Vanderbilt comes to town, and the Crimson Tide, they want payback, obviously, against the team that shocked them, made history in 2024, and it almost feels like history is made whenever Alabama gets beat by anybody. And our guest today did not see that kind of history made during at least one of his seasons in Tuscaloosa, certainly not very often, helping us to figure all this out with Vanderbilt today. He's one of the greatest offensive linemen to ever play at Alabama, first team All SEC, first team consensus All American, BCS national champion, helping Alabama to win their first title in 17 years, the rebirth of the Alabama football dynasty. Also, the co host of the morning shift on 92.9 The Game, former Crimson Tide and Atlanta Falcons offensive lineman Mike Johnson. Thanks for doing this again, man.
Man, I appreciate it. I don't need all that. Just big, ugly, or offensive lineman will suffice. But I appreciate that nonetheless.
We got nothing but respect. I got to point out your hat, man. That logo, that logo has made a comeback as of the last couple of years. Do you prefer that to the script A?
Oh, doesn't everybody? I mean, I look. I have an immense amount of respect for the script A. Around here in Atlanta, all it is a Braves logo with a mullet, according to the Georgia people. But the block A, man, come on, dude. Like it gets no better than the block A with the elephant coming through the middle. It's classic. Alabama's classic. It just goes hand in hand. There's no doubt.
It's the Yankees. It's the Green Bay G. It's the name your classic logo that belongs up there in the elite category. Mike, you were on the Alabama football team from 2006 to 2009. You were on the roster when Alabama faced Vanderbilt in 2006 and then again in 2007. The first year was closer than people might remember. Alabama won 13-10 in Tuscaloosa. The next year, y'all got them 24-10 in Nashville. Obviously, Mike Shula's final season and the Nick Saban's first season. I want to get into what it was like when you saw Vandy on the other sideline, but focusing on what we saw last year and what we'll see on Saturday. Vandy, they've long been a punchline, the SEC whipping boy for so many years, but not anymore. Obviously, they beat number one Alabama in 2024. They're undefeated so far in 2025, and you can bet they want to do it again. Mike, why is this no longer your grandfather's Vanderbilt Commodores?
Well, I think there's a number of different things to look at. It's the era in which we're playing right now, the NIL, the transfer portal. I mean, they're one of the first to do what I think is going to become in vogue around college football, and that's bring a transfer quarterback along with his coordinator, which is exactly what they did with Diego Pavia. You saw that with John Mateer at Oklahoma. They bring his coordinator in as well. It's just, look, they operate very efficiently, and they have guys that while they may not be the most physically talented up front on offense and defense, I say it all the time, they're willing to fall on their face. They're either going to hit you really hard or you're going to move out of the way, when they're coming to hit you. So it's a combination of things. I think in the SEC as a whole that the ceiling has kind of come down a little bit, but the floor has also risen. It's not only Vanderbilt. Look at Mississippi State. I mean, Ole Miss right now, who doesn't have a track record of being great, is a top 5 program. There is a lot of good teams in the SEC. I don't know if there's any terrible, and I don't know if there's any elite. There's a lot of teams right there in the middle, and Vandy obviously being part of that. But they do things differently. They do things, suited to what they do well, and I think that speaks heavily of Diego Pavia, Clark Lee, and that entire program up there, man. They are willing to hit people in the mouth, and in this day and age in football, there's a lot to be said about that.
Well, I mean, if you're close to our age, right? Like it's just an insane thing to see and realize, especially if you grew up an Alabama fan, you played at Alabama, and like what Vanderbilt has meant not just to the SEC but to Alabama specifically. But I mean, there have been competitive Vanderbilt games. I just mentioned one of them in particular. But I mean, if we're talking about last year, things could not have started worse for Alabama in Nashville. Vandy gets the ball first. They run it down Alabama's throats to score on the opening drive. Alabama gets it. Jalen Milroe throws a tip pass. They return for a pick six. Suddenly it's 14-0. Alabama's got a huge hole to climb out of. We've seen them make similar comebacks before, and they made this game competitive, but they just couldn't get the stops, couldn't make the plays that they needed to make. Vandy seemed more determined. They even seemed more physical. Mike, from an X's and O's standpoint, how did Clark Lee's team make things so hard for Alabama that day?
Well, first of all, I think they did things extremely well. They did the thing that has really, it's not just a Caleb DeBoer thing. This has really plagued Alabama's defenses for a long time. The dual threat quarterback, the last minute throws on RPOs, the read options, things like that. I mean, this is the reason Gus Malzahn's record wasn't terrible when he was at Auburn. This is the reason Hugh Freeze's teams have given Alabama fits in years past. Man, it's just when you have the dual threat quarterback and a quarterback who knows how to operate that system very efficiently, this is what you can do to any defense. Now, I think on the flip side of that, let's just focus from an Alabama perspective. I think Alabama was very hesitant in what they were supposed to do last year. Not only in the X's and O's of like passing off stunts, it's a new offense. Jalen Milroe kind of confused as to where to go with the ball or what tempo to utilize. I think they were also confused as to where the leadership was coming a year ago. When you go to sleepy game on the road, a lot of fans there. I think that they were kind of looking around, waiting for a Nick Saban style of approach from a coach or some member like that. And they had to kind of develop leadership. I told the story a number of times. Kalen DeBoer names leaders before the year. Nick Saban used to wait till after the season because he didn't want to excuse anybody from having to step up and kind of be vocal. So, you mix all of that in. You mix in a new defense, a new offense, guys kind of looking around for leadership. And I think Vandy just hit him at the right time a year ago. I mean, I was on AL.com a year ago, and I was saying Vandy can beat Alabama. It's not so much that Alabama's bad. It's that Vandy's very good, and they continue to be good. And I think we've seen that play out against numerous opponents of theirs this year.
Yeah, we shouldn't act surprised anymore that Vandy is playing the way that they are. And, Mike, we've heard Ryan Williams say during the offseason, Alabama wants to kill an ant with a sledgehammer. He said that back during the summer. Diego Pavia obviously took note of that on his social media. Do you believe in the concept, I guess, of the revenge game, right? Like, can you remember a season where your team had payback on your minds? Like, for some reason, obviously, Florida in 2008 and 2009 springs to mind, but are we really supposed to believe that y'all would treat it like any other game?
Well, there's a caveat to that. I do believe in the revenge game, but I don't believe in it week of the revenge game. I believe in the revenge game in February and March and April. And that is one of the things that Nick Saban absolutely believed in. I mean, you go back to Nick Saban's first year, we lose back-to-back games to Louisiana, Monroe, and Mississippi State. Guess what our wallpaper in our locker room looked like for the next 6 months? It wasn't about the week we played Mississippi State the following year. It was about all the months leading up to that, where we have posters with the scoreboard and, Sylvester Croom riding shoulders off the field at Mississippi State. So I do believe in the revenge game. I believe that there is something when you are embarrassed as a football player, when you have such a low as a team that you look to and, during mat drills, during fourth quarter, whatever it is they're doing and say, okay, I don't ever want that to happen again. The key is when you get to game week, it shouldn't feel like that. You should feel like you've been doing that every step of the way, not playing up on game week and saying, man, we really got to beat these guys this week. It should be that way every way. Nick Saban always talked about the process and not scoreboard watching and just putting one foot in front of the other and getting better on every single rep. I lived that to a T back then. And while we did lose to, to Louisiana Monroe and Mississippi State in 07, and while we did lose to Florida and Utah in 08, we use those every day of the offseason, not so much game week. And I'm hoping that's what Alabama has done, heading into this season as well.
Mike, it's interesting. It's a great perspective. In having played for Nick Saban, I'm just curious, like, he's such a big picture guy. You said process. Like, it just seems like he doesn't worry about the specificity of it, and he wants y'all to buy into something much bigger than that. But I do wonder, I mean, he obviously believes in sports psychology too. So if he needs you guys to like reach a different level, would he sort of like play mind games like that? You mentioned plastering the walls with imagery of La Monroe and Mississippi State and all these other things. We heard about the never again thing related to Auburn and other games where he wanted y'all to get your minds right, to use a phrase that he liked to use. But like, would he get specific? Like, these guys embarrassed y'all last year. You going to let that happen again? Or was it still just all kind of big picture for him?
He would get specific, but only specific to, like you just sounded, these guys. It was never, I don't think he ever mentioned the words like LSU or Auburn or Mississippi State. It was this team or those guys on the across the field, or these guys coming into town, or this group of people. And you can go back and I think one of the most famous speeches he gave is 2008. He's standing on a cooler down in Baton Rouge. We were #1 ranked team. We're going down to play Baton Rouge. It was the first time he had ever been back there. And his whole speech was about us, but it was about establishing us, right? I mean, LSU's coming off a national title season in 2007, and it's like, this group doesn't have respect for you, and these guys are expecting you to lay down, and this is what they think about you. So, yes, he used those tactics, but it was in a very vague way that always seemed to refocus on us. And I love that. I mean, I still take that mentality into my everyday life. It's all about doing what we can do at the highest level in every rep. It's not about, the points scored and things like that. It's simply, hey, did I drive my guy off the ball 5 yards, on a run play? It doesn't matter if it's 38-0 or a tie game. It is what it is. You play up to a standard, like he used to call it. So there was some of those tactics, but in a very vague Nick Saban way. He was never going to say like your opponent's name. He would have never said Diego Pavia to the team. Matter of fact, when he's on game day and he talks about players from other schools, it still makes me cringe. I'm like, what are we doing? I don't need you to talk about specific game records. Just talk about doing your job down in and down out.
Yeah, different guy, it seems, from when he was in the locker room and on the sideline. But the standing on the cooler detail is going to stick with me there, Mike. I remember listening, honestly, like I was actually in the car for the first part of the Vandy game last year. I remember listening to the Alabama broadcast. And before the game even started, really cool detail here, too. Alabama's radio broadcast team, they mic'd the coin toss. And you could hear it from the jump. The teams were talking trash. And you could even hear Jalen Milroe mixing it up with their players. Is it possible that Alabama was too amped up, that it sort of affected their focus, that Vandy may have even gotten in their heads? Like we've often heard Coach Saban talk about not playing with too much emotion, right? Like what do you remember about how he coached y'all away from playing that way and focusing on the actual game plan to beat your opponent?
Well, I haven't heard that angle, considering them being too amped up. Now, I think they were probably, smelling themselves a little bit much at that point, coming off the Georgia win last year. And look, they can't be faulted for this. And I know that, under Nick Saban, we were kind of trained not to think this way, but I don't know if Kalen DeBoer was even prepared to coach his team against a letdown the following week against a Vanderbilt. Coach DeBoer is probably thinking, okay, SEC opponent, these guys will probably be up. I think Kalen DeBoer is learning a lot on the job, right now. I think that he's kind of going, okay, well, it's going to take another level of this, another level of that. But yeah, I mean, there's always the chance that you're always amped up. And I think that's what Nick was so good at was, and Lord knows, I think I got this chewing a number of times and no my teammates did. He would talk about your vanity. He always used the word vanity. It's like, I remember a buddy of mine pushes somebody after an extra point. And, gets in like a shoving match and there's a personal foul on him. And all of a sudden the kickoff's moved back and the ensuing return after our extra point, all of a sudden they've got the ball in the 50 in a big game. Can't even remember what game it was, but it was like your vanity led you to want to push that guy just because you're so proud of yourself that you thought you needed to push somebody and you cost the whole team. It always went back to the vanity. Don't be so prideful that you're going to hurt your teammates around you that, have sacrificed blood, sweat, and tears. So there is something to that. And, I just think it's all about being laser focused in those moments. And sometimes teams can take you by surprise. We went undefeated in 2009, but I think we had a 4-game stretch where we didn't score an offensive touchdown. We almost lose a game on the blocked field goal to Tennessee. We almost lose to South Carolina when Mark Ingram, rushes for 250 yards, but we couldn't get in the end zone until the very end. There's just there's a number of different caveats and holes you can fall in throughout these game weeks that can lead to a lack of success. And you have to do everything you can to try to minimize those opportunities.
I love picturing like big, tough football players, walking out on the field and in their heads, they're like, all right, check your vanity. Make sure your vanity doesn't get out of control.
It happened, man. I'm telling you, you want to talk about big, tough football players. We were scared of a 5'9" head coach that we were sure was going to dress us down any given moment. So,
yeah, he may come flying off that cooler at any second, like you said. So, Mike, why is Diego Pavia such a problem? You talking about stature and how it doesn't matter, right? Like it isn't just Alabama. The guy just seems like a competitor, somebody who plays best on a big stage. Not the biggest arm, again, not the biggest guy, not even the fastest. But Alabama struggled so badly to keep him and that team from making the plays that they needed to make to pull off the upset. Do you think that the team just kind of goes as Diego Pavia goes?
I don't think there's any. I mean, he is the prototype of the straw that stirs the drink, right? We hear that kind of phrase all the time in football. There's no doubt about it in my mind. I mean, he is, and I think this really is an overused kind of thing in football, but he really is like having a coach on the field. He knows the offense so well. There's always an answer, right? If you have great offensive coaches, Joe Pendria was this way, Jim McElwain was this way. There's always an answer, right? Very, very few times would we line up on offense and say, well, they just got us that time. Just good call. Like you always in our offenses started with the worst possible scenario and how you would attack the worst possible scenario. And then you'd build from there and say, okay, if we get this look, it's going to be a great play. But you'd always start with the worst possible scenario. That's what I see when I think of Diego Pavia. He understands what's the worst possible scenario on any given play and can get you out of that situation. He's been in this offense for 4 years now. He's in lockstep with the coaching staff. He understands assignments all across the board, not just his own, not just where to go with the ball, but when I'm looking at defenses, when I'm seeing cover three, when I'm seeing man, when I'm seeing off coverage, when to throw, the speed screen, when to run right at a guy. I mean, he just has total and complete command of what this offense is trying to do for Vanderbilt. And when you have a guy like that can think on his own 2 feet and not constantly looking towards the sideline or not constantly trying to make an adjustment, they're very dangerous. Not only that, but he's extremely athletic. He's accurate with the football most of the time, although I think he will give you one every now and then. But all those things mixed together, a little bit of bravado, a little bit of leadership, and man, he's a problem. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, when you have confidence and no fear out there, right? That's dangerous. And you got the skill set and you got the game plan. So, yeah, it's tough. So, Alabama's quarterback, there are obviously questions about it going into the season. Could Ty Simpson step in and execute Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb's offense? He only has to be an effective game manager for Alabama to compete nationally, is what people were saying. But he's obviously stepped up and become one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the country. He was huge in Athens last week. What have you seen and liked from Ty Simpson a few games into the season?
Well, expectation versus reality is always a big thing. And I think a lot of people I talk to that are Alabama fans or cover Alabama or whatever, I was always given the name Jake Coker. The ceiling is Jake Coker. If he can just be Jake Coker. And I love Jake Coker. I'm friends with Jake Coker. I think he's a good dude. I think a lot of people also looked at like an AJ McCarron thing. And here's the problem with that, man. A.J. McCarron and Jake Coker were behind two of the greatest offensive line and running games in the history of college football. I mean, just straight up. When you look at the guys they had, the first round draft picks on the offensive line, the running backs like a Trent Richardson or an Eddie Lacy or a Derrick Henry, there was that component. I don't think that Ty Simpson is playing with that component. Now, are they an improved run game? I think. Does Jam Miller bring a different aspect to that? Absolutely. But even watching them against Georgia, I thought the blocking of the run game was actually better than the output of the run game. I thought the blocks were there, and Jam Miller, as he gets more incorporated, a cut here, a cut there, a broken tackle here, and it's going to be more explosive, and give credit to Georgia on that as well. But all of a sudden, with all of that kind of taken into effect, Ty Simpson becomes the game plan. Ty Simpson is the guy. And I thought that when he was at Florida State, I think he looked confused. I think the offensive line looked confused. And I think, therefore, the whole team looked confused. Fast forward to Georgia. I don't know that I've ever seen a guy be more in command of an offense than what Ty Simpson was against Georgia in Athens between the hedges. Remember, and I live in Georgia, it's been 6 years since they've lost a home game over there. You just don't see it happen. And so for Ty Simpson to take the field, be able to survey things, be able to look left, look right, shout out to Ryan Grubb for getting the play call in a timely manner so that there can be things at the line of scrimmage. Even some of the things you don't like Ty Simpson having to take a timeout on a 3rd and 1 or, some of the opportunities in the first half, he was still in command. He understood, hey, we're in a bad situation right here. Let's not let this get out of hand. Let me call a timeout and move towards the sideline. So I think he's been incredible, really, since week 1. And I think Alabama has done every single thing possible since week 1 to make sure that they have kind of corrected course and gotten back on course. You look at the crazy, obviously, game early in the year where he goes perfect. The quarterbacks are almost perfect. And then the Wisconsin game, they're explosive. And then obviously Georgia, he was just in complete command. That's the most third down conversions that Georgia has given up in 30 years, which is insane. And that's credit to Ty Simpson, because it's not like he's just got this crazy good running game in front of him. It's serviceable and it's getting better. But man, he's everything you hoped he would be. You can see the leadership starting to bud a little bit and start to come to him. And I think he's, the sky's the limit for him.
Yeah, and a lot of that success is pass pro, right? And I want to ask you about the offensive line, because, I mean, this is your area of expertise, obviously. There are guys like Caden Proctor, Parker Brailsford. We knew that they had their positions locked down going into the season, but we've seen some movement in the rotation. They're still trying to kind of find the right group, the right chemistry for the totality of the unit. They clearly kept Ty Simpson upright against Georgia in what looked like their best game of the season so far. But a big storyline this year, like you just alluded to, is not seeing the push up front when Alabama runs the ball. How would you grade the offensive line so far, and what do you want to see from them this weekend and moving forward?
Well, it's really a tale of two different things, right? I thought against Florida State, and let me go back. The first drive against Florida State, and I think I actually tweeted this out, I was like, man, this looks like a completely new offensive line. And this, and look, you were around. You saw what we were in 2008 and 2009. We just ran the ball. I mean, there were times I laugh now at box counts. I'm like, the box count wasn't even a thing. Like when we were playing, it didn't matter if they had 12 in the box. Like we were just going to, if we moved 5 yards, then the running back would be able to move 5 yards. So I think there's been ups and downs. I think I've been really, first of all, Parker Brailsford might be the best player on the team. And I say that with all due respect to Ty Simpson and Ryan Williams and Jeremy Bernard, whoever else. He might be the best player on the team. I'm a massive fan of Parker Brailsford right there in the middle. Caden Proctor with all the talent. I thought it was really interesting to see the trick play last weekend where he catches the ball, because I think that kind of lets you in on what the coaches think of him, to be able to put a guy like that up to bat, lets you know that the coaches kind of trust him and they're, he's endeared to them. But other than that, look, there's been some ups and downs. I thought, I thought Wilcom Formby had one of his better days. He still bends at the waist too much in pass protection. But when the guys inside on the offensive line are stout enough, you can still force some of those guys on the edge to kind of run the hump just a little bit and get around. So there's been a lot of improvement. And honestly, when it comes to offensive line play, sometimes it's not finding the best five. Sometimes it's about finding the best five that work together. And, maybe one guy is stouter in the pocket and therefore they can pass off twist games better. There's a lot of moving parts. That's why continuity along an offensive line is so big. And so as long as they can start to build that continuity and, start moving forward with the right five guys up front, I think they've got a lot of talent. I think the sky's kind of the limit. I really like the push they're able to get right now. And like I said a minute ago, and I'll just say this again, I thought the actual offensive line blocking was much better than the run game output. I think that sometimes, a wide receiver misses a block, a tight end misses a block, a running back doesn't make a cut, or sometimes it is just on the offensive line. But when I was watching just those five guys, I thought they did a really good job. I thought the output would be a lot more. And at one point, the dam would break and Jam Miller would break one for about 40 or 50 yards. It didn't happen. But I think if they go in with the same attitude and kind of game plan against Vanderbilt, that it absolutely could be something we see.
Incredible. I mean, you see the game at a level that most of us cannot and will not. And people call it, the game within the game in the trenches, but it is the game, right? Like, it is the game. That's where football is really played, and that's who wins and loses the game for the teams. But Mike, I got to ask you, you mentioned the trick play. How did you react when you saw Caden Proctor catch that screen pass rumble towards the end zone last Saturday? I need the offensive lineman's take on what everybody saw from the big man with the ball.
Well, first and foremost, two things hit my mind. 2006, we ran a trick play throwback to Andre Smith in the Independence Bowl. That's the first thing that popped in my mind, because Andre Smith is the most physically gifted person I've ever seen. I mean, the most physically gifted person I ever witnessed put on cleats. And that goes right next to Julio Jones and Trent Richardson and whoever else. I mean, Andre Smith was just insane. I think Caden Proctor belongs in that realm. And I know that he's gotten in better shape. And like I said, the first thing I reacted to was, I wonder how many times they practice that. Now, you're talking to a guy, look, I got it right here. I scored a touchdown in the NFL one time. And I bet we practiced the play 10 times, and I got the ball 0 on any of those practice snaps. This one was designed to go to Caden Proctor. And you hear some of the backstory on the broadcast. I thought was great. It was like, we practiced it 8 times, and I told them if they ever messed it up, we would never run this play. And yet they went about it in the right way. I just thought it was, man. I mean, come on. It was epic. I was almost disappointed that Caden Proctor was trying to read his blocks. I'm like, why are we, you're 360 pounds. Why are we reading blocks? Just pick one out and carry 3 of them to the end zone. I don't know why we're trying to read the blocks, man. But it was electric. And I love that he got a chance to have that moment. Not only him, but all the other big fellas there for Alabama's offensive line. That's something that they'll never forget.
Gosh, if I'm Jeremy Bernard and Jam Miller out there wide blocking for him, I'm like, what are we going to do for this guy? Like this guy coming behind us, like if he runs into us, it was amazing to watch. But, we recently talked about those goal line formations where Terrence Cody and Jesse Williams and Darren Payne would line up in the backfield as blockers. And, when you have a guy who's 6'7", 360, if not more, who appears to be, like you just said, pretty athletic and physically gifted, able to secure the ball, I realize that the big boys don't have the burst or the first step like the running backs do from the backfield, but why don't we see it more in football in short yardage situations when it is obviously so difficult to bring down a guy of that size? Why don't they get the ball more often?
Well, I'll start with this. First and foremost, if you have your 6'7", 360-pound guy running the ball, then he's not blocking. So you have to replace him up front with that one. But I'm with you, man. I mean, I always wish Terrence Cody would have gotten the ball in a goal line situation. I don't think he ever quite did. But, I mean, Terrence Cody, you want to talk about great athletes. I saw him do a windmill dunk when he weighed about 350. Still one of the craziest things I've ever seen. Look, it is what it is. It's the whole thing, and I've coached high school ball. It's like you have so much you need to work on at any given time that you hate to spend time on, like Caden Proctor taking a snap from under center or taking a handoff. And so, you sprinkle these things in and you try to build on them. And look, I think if anybody was really paying attention, I just talked about Ty Simpson taking a timeout on a 3rd down. Caden Proctor was coming in motion when Ty Simpson calls timeout. I'm just saying, like, this is not the end of the story from where I'm sitting. So I wouldn't rule any of it out. I'm always in favor of big men getting their hands on the ball, though, man. It almost brings a tear to my eye.
I mean, like everybody keeps using that phrase, business decision about the defensive backs who are in front of him. I mean, that's the only way to put it. But I'm with you, though, too. Watching the game, I'm in like an anxious state. And all of a sudden, I see Caden Proctor moving, and I just say out loud, "Why is Caden Proctor in motion right now?
Yes.
What is happening?"
My mind exploded with the possibilities because I'm like, okay, you could run him on a split zone, and he's blocking the backside. You could, use him as a lead blocker if Ty Simpson pulls the ball on a zone read. I just was like, what? First of all, what eye candy could they be thinking of here? And second of all, what way can you utilize somebody that big and athletic? And then when it comes out with the screen later on, I'm like, my mind is absolutely blown. My mind is blown that they called it and that it worked, which is just beautiful.
He just missed the pylon, man. That's the only thing he didn't do was finish the play, right? Got to score.
Truck somebody, man. Don't read the blocks and work the sideline. Just carry 3 people with you. What are we doing?
We've seen it earlier this year, though. I mean, in the game where they had the double reverse pass back to Ryan Williams, Caden Proctor's down the field and just like smashing people all the way down the field. So the guy can move at that size. It's unbelievable. So
there's probably a reason. Honestly, that play might be a big reason why Ryan Grubb called it. Like, look, man, if you're going to smash people on screens, I'll throw you a bone at some point. So there you go.
Love it. All right, a couple more for you here, Mike. I'm curious. ESPN is sending College Game Day to Tuscaloosa this week for Alabama Vandy, an indicator that this is arguably the biggest game of the week. I mean, the show came, if we're talking about your career, the show came to Tuscaloosa for Georgia in 2007. They were there in Atlanta for Clemson. They were at Georgia and LSU for 2008, some neutral site games in 2009. You've played in a lot of big games, the biggest games for championships. So that kind of attention, that kind of comes with postseason play, and you might expect that. But when it's in the regular season, how aware is the team when game day is in town? Like, does that raise the level? Is that rat poison and clutter that Saban would always preach about? Or was it something that was kind of hard to tune out in spite of what he said?
I think it was impossible to tune out personally. You know, we were Bryant Hall was just built when I was, I don't know, 2008 or 2009. The dining room that we had, they probably built a new one since then. I'm getting so old. There's no telling what they got now. They might eat. I'm sure they eat somewhere completely different. But we just had a new dining place built, and there was TVs everywhere in this new dining facility. And what do you think every TV was on in a Bryant Hall ESPN? And every single one of them was highlight commercial and College Game Day and Corso's headgear. I mean, heck, I remember it was either 08 or 09. We're playing Florida. We were one of the first games that had its own part on the bottom line on ESPN. It would always say like college football, NFL, and then one day they just put up Florida versus Bama on the bottom line. It had its own little subcategory, which I thought was cool. But it's hard, man. It's hard to deny. But for where Alabama is right now, I kind of like that. Right? We just talked about how Alabama last year against Vanderbilt. Maybe you're sleepwalking. Maybe you're feeling yourself. Maybe it's you're a little bit looser at practice because of the fact that it's Vanderbilt and you're coming off beating Georgia. Dude, the weight of the world is on your shoulders this week. Everybody knows you lost to them last year, and College Game Day is going to be in town talking about this matchup. Matter of fact, I don't ever go to Alabama games. I'm coming to town this weekend in Tuscaloosa, man. I work every Sunday on the Atlanta Falcons broadcast. Falcons have a bye week this week. Guess where I'm going? I'm going to the Vanderbilt-Alabama game. So I'm really stoked to get in town for it. I'm sure the players are aware of all the storylines going on with it, which sometimes can be too much. But in this case, I think it's actually a good thing that you're reminded of how good Vanderbilt actually is, each day this week.
Well, let's start the campaign. Mike Johnson, celebrity picker on game day on Saturday.
Hey, I'll make a fool of myself out there. They don't want any of that.
Last thing, Mike, I don't need a score prediction from you, but what's your confidence level for Alabama on Saturday?
Oh, man, good question. Confidence level is at about 60%. And look, I talked about this earlier. I was on AL.com last year giving the rundown, and I said, and a lot of people hated me for it, that Vanderbilt has the ability to beat Alabama. Remember, this is coming off the Georgia win. Vanderbilt has the ability to go beat Alabama because they operate in such a way that will give anybody problems. Now, Vanderbilt last year, a lot of people remember this. They lost to Georgia State at Georgia State, like at Turner Field or whatever they're calling that down there in Midtown Atlanta. They lost that game last year. That's not what's happening with Vanderbilt this year. They're better in a lot of different ways this year than they were last year. But I think if you get the Alabama product, the efficiency you had, the lack of penalties that you had between the hedges last week, and you play within yourself, and that offensive line continues to come off with that tenacity with Jan Miller in that run game, take a little bit of something off of Ty Simpson's shoulders, and then have your guys out wide blocking at a high level the way we've seen from Jeremy Bernard and sometimes Ryan Williams, then I think you can do anything. So I would put it at 60%, my confidence level. It probably should be higher. I think some other people will say that theirs is higher, but I knew that Vanderbilt was going to be a problem a year ago, and they're better now than they were a year ago. So I'm not in this boat after one win or one loss that Kalen DeBoer is one thing or is one thing. It's just simply a matchup thing and making sure you rise to the occasion every week. So I think they can get it done. I think they will get it done. But until I see the clock hit zeros, I will have hesitation all the way.
You know ball, man, much more than we do. That's to say the least. But Mike, I mean, you're great at this. We appreciate it. We know that you don't need this, you said at the top of this, but you're one of the greats to wear crimson and white, an All-American and national champion, Mike Johnson. Thanks so much for doing this.
Appreciate you, brother. Roll Tide.